Casey, you wrote the novel that was adapted into the film Red, White, and Royal Blue, and you also executive produced the film. Well, first off, what inspired you to tell this story? How did you discover these characters?
Oof. I mean, I think it goes back to so many things. I was like a child of the 90s rom-com, like the late 90s rom-com. And so I grew up on like a steady diet of like the Princess Diaries, um, My Date with the President's Daughter, Chasing Liberty, all of these sort of like frothy wish fulfillment rom-coms about these young people in unbelievable circumstances on the world stage and all of the silly things and difficult things that come with being in that role. And so I think I was always fascinated by the archetypes that came from those movies, the rebellious first kid or, the Prince Charming who's like a little more complicated on the inside under the surface. And I just really wanted to explore both of those characters, and I wanted to do it in a way that I hadn't really seen before. And also, just like as a queer person, like I want to make queer art, and that's what I'm drawn to, and that's what I'm interested in. And so I kind of had these two different ideas. It was like one idea was that I would write a book about this rebellious first kid who's like figuring out that they're queer and what does that mean for their like political aspirations. And the other was about, sort of a member of the royal family under all of this pressure to carry on this legacy and like what does that mean if they're gay? And I'm just kind of like weighing these two different stories and deciding where I wanted to go. And then I just kind of had this moment of like, what if I didn't have to choose? And it was the same story because they fall in love with each other. And in a classic bisexual fashion, I was like, I'm gonna have both. So I did.
And when a book is popular, of course, you can usually expect there to be interest in adapting it into a film or a series. Like, when were you first approached to bring this book to the screen? How did that happen?
It was actually unbelievable the way that it happened, and it remains to this day one of the most surreal weeks of my life. Because it was, I want to say March 2019. So the book actually hadn't come out yet. The book wouldn't come out for another 2 months. But like early copies get circulated around producers and writers, and people began to take interest. And I got a call from my agent that there was interest, and then next thing I knew, there was more interest. And so over the span of a week, I had 9 calls with 9 different producers who were all interested in optioning the rights to make a film, which was already blowing my mind. Like nothing like that ever happened to me in my life. It's my debut novel. I'm like new kid on the block, and suddenly I'm talking to, Berlanti Studios. And I really clicked with Berlanti, and then I really clicked with the Amazon team. And I think I've always dreamed of writing a book and having it adapted to a movie. I think anyone that grew up in the era of like, I hate to say it, but the era of Twilight, I think we all, any writer who grew up on that kind of diet dreams of one day having your book adapted to film. And it was just beyond anything I ever could have imagined.
And how much, if any, trepidation is there when you take something that you created and you entrust it to another creator?
It's scary. It really is scary. My agent said something to me very early in the process where she was like, listen, you need to think of this as like a parent trap situation where you have 2 twins and you get to raise one and the other you're sending off to be raised on another continent. And they're and you're just gonna find out in a few years what they turned out to be, and that's what's gonna happen. And you have to make peace with that. And I did. And I think it was really scary, but it was also like I had the luxury of choice because I had more than one producer who was interested. I had more than one production team. I had more than one studio that was interested. And so I really was spoiled for choice, and I got to choose the people I connected with most on those calls and in those meetings, and the ones that I trusted and the ones who I could tell had the same priorities that I did in telling the story, which was to like preserve the heart of it and the joy of it and like the triumph of it. And so I was really scared, but I was also really reassured that I had made the right choices because I was having all of those conversations. And because I could really feel how deeply each person I spoke to cared about the integrity of what was on the page.
Were there any like assurances you wanted, like certain aspects of the story that you wanted to make sure were honored and translated to the screen?
Yeah, I think like I said, I think the heart of it was one of the biggest things was like the tone of it, like the way that it had this sort of like cheekiness, but also was really sincere and really earnest and really joyful and really celebratory. I really wanted that to be carried through in the movie. I didn't want it to be mean-spirited. I didn't want it to be overly, sanitized. I wanted characters who acted the way they did in the book, who were smart and sometimes impolite and sometimes messy and ill-guided, but also really passionate and really good. But I also like there were things that were more specific. Like it was really important to me that Alex was explicitly bisexual because I really wanted the representation of of this bisexual character. And then it was important to me that he was also Mexican, like he is in the book, and that he was played by a Mexican actor. And it was really important to me that I didn't want Alex or Henry, no matter how their stories were translated to the screen. I didn't want either of them to have any type of shame or resentment towards themselves for being queer. It was really important to me that the stakes of their lives and like their inner conflict was much more based on like the circumstances that they're in. It's like if they don't hate themselves for being gay, they just wish, or for being bi, they just wish that it was easier to be who they were in the world that they live in, you know?
And did you have any hand in the screenwriting process? Like, were you able to, did they reach out to you for, guidance or tips or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I got to read some drafts. I got to give my notes on those drafts. And they were very generous about, listening to my notes and about taking my thoughts into account. But at the same time, I was very much like writing books, and I was like, I'm trying to launch this career as an author, so like Godspeed, good luck. I can't wait to read it. Hope it's great. And so I it was like truly a consulting type of role. And then as they went into production, I feel like I got more involved on like more of a granular level because Matthew would be, every day working on the script or working on props or working on, this is what we're shooting today. And so he would reach out to me and ask me like, well, what should this piece of jewelry that this character wears look like? Can you send me a picture of what you imagine? Or like, what should be the records on Alex's bedroom wall? Can you like send me a list of records that Alex would like? And those are the records that are on the wall in the movie. So I got to be still very involved in making these really important character choices that, might sound small, but make a big difference in how the character is being actualized in the movie. So yeah, so I was involved, but I was very thankful that I was able to also like step back and let it happen.
And the lead characters in the film are played by Taylor Zakhar Perez and Nicholas Galitzine. How did they compare to the images you had of the characters in your mind when you were writing the novel?
I mean, I will say Taylor's definitely several inches taller than I, which he will be delighted to hear me to know that I said that, because he's very proud of being tall. But he's much taller than the character I pictured in the book. But other than that, strictly like purely on the level of Alex's energy and Alex's aura and his sort of chaotic nature and his the way he's just like a cannonball, the way that he moves through life. So just unapologetically and sometimes impulsively. I feel like Taylor embodies that so beautifully, and he just does such a great job of packing all of that character into this physical performance, into the looks on his face. I mean, I think he's just killer in that role. And Nick, I mean, I don't like, I feel like Nick just like, if you like turned me upside down and shook me, like he would fall out my brain as Henry. I think just embodies that character so completely, looks like him and then talks like him. And, has like those like the only thing it doesn't have is the blue eyes, but they sure are sad eyes, and that is exactly what they need to be. I think he did he's he's also so incredibly cast, and then when you put them together, like the alchemy of them is just it's so perfect.
And Matthew Lopez being the director and the co-writer of the script, like what did you think of the way he captured the spirit of the novel in terms of just capturing the tone and the heart of it?
I think he did such a great job. I mean, I think that it is not an easy task to take a book that is that long and try to condense it into not only like a 2 hour movie, but like a 2 hour movie that feels really propulsive and snappy and is getting across as much as you possibly can of this story, and in as much of like a an effective and fast paced way, and still make you feel like you understand these characters and you understand what they see in each other and how they why they would risk so much for each other. So I don't envy the task he had before him, and I think he did such a great job of making really thoughtful choices about how to execute that and where to trim and where to condense and where to combine. And yeah, it could not have been easy, and I applaud him for it.
I'm sure you've been asked before about the possibility of a sequel to this book and potentially the film. But regardless of whether or not that happens, do you keep these characters, or in general, characters you write in your head? Do they kind of live on, and you imagine what they're doing later on after the events of whatever you've written for them?
Oh, they absolutely do. Absolutely. I mean, I think every character that I write has such a huge place in my heart because I spend so much time with them, like from the time that I start drafting and the time I start developing the characters all the way through putting the book out, going on tour. I mean, when I go on a book tour, it's like it's me and it's them, and we are in this together and we're writing this out. And so like they all feel like my kids, like a combination of my kids and like some of my oldest, dearest friends, and so they're always going to live on in my heart. And yeah, I'm always like, there's so many times that I'll see something and it will remind me of a character, and I'll be like, yeah, somewhere in some universe, all these years later, this character is eating that Pop Tart, yeah, truly they live on.
And when you see them coming back up in your life, is that because like there's a little bit of you in every character you write?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think any writer who says there's not some of themselves and at least some of the characters they write is lying. I mean, I've so much of writing for me at least is a lot of it is about like working through things that I see in my life, that I experienced in my life, that inspire me, that are around me. Like I feel like there's everything, everything is kind of extracted from somewhere, and so I certainly see myself in a lot of my characters. I see myself in Alex tremendously. I'm very much an Alex, and I relate to him so much. Truly, I think he's the most like me of all my characters.
Red, White, and Royal Blue was your debut novel, as you mentioned. You've already written a couple more books since then, and another one coming out this year, I believe, which is quite a prolific amount of creative output. What's your writing process like?
I mean, I feel like I have to take my time sometimes with these books. Like when I get an idea and I sit down to write something, I really have to like dig in. It has to be like eat, breathe, sleep, this story, these characters. That's just my process. I am like in it. I am like, I jokingly call it like in the hole. Like I need to just like go down into my hole with this story and not come out for a while. And so my process is obsession. But actually my process is, like every time I feel like I become more and more of an intentional writer. I've always been very much a plotter, a plan ahead type of writer, but I try to become more and more technical with my prep for each book every time. And then I just like I think from there I'm just chasing what I want to read and what is fun to write. And that is the ultimate privilege of writing romance is I think it is the most fun genre to write. I am sure that like thriller writers will say that about thrillers and mystery writers will say that about mystery, but to me, I mean, there's just nothing like writing romance. I feel incredibly lucky to get to do that as my job.
If you weren't writing romances, are there any other genres that you might have dipped your toe into or still might?
I mean, look, I'm a sucker for fantasy. I love a good fantasy novel. I was a huge Tolkien kid. I absolutely love Tolkien. And so I think if it wasn't romance, and maybe I still could find my way over to fantasy one day.
Now that your work has been adapted into film, is screenwriting something that you've ever considered, or do you consider yourself strictly prose?
No, I mean, I think books are my home that I will always come back to, but I'm very interested in screenwriting. And I very much would love screenwriting to become part of what I do. I'll say it that way.
Congratulations on the book, on every book that's followed, on the adaptation, and everything you've got coming up. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel.
Star in Red, White, and Royal Blue as first son Alex Claremont Diaz, who falls in love with British Prince Henry. It's based on the novel by Casey McQuiston. Were you familiar with that book before the script came your way, or did you read it afterwards?
Yeah, a casting director friend of mine said that it was going to start casting, and he's like, "Hey, have a read of this before you get to meet with the director." And so I read it over the weekend, and I just was so moved by it. And so when it finally came around to have that meeting, I was really excited.
And the book, has a passionate following. How did it feel to step into that and play one of the central roles with the fan base that it already had?
Very tough. I've been added to successful franchises before, after the characters have been established, and being able to kind of originate this character from this book was definitely put a lot of weight on my shoulders, mine and Nick's shoulders. And we took it and ran with it because we knew how much this book meant to people and how we had to get these characters right. And I think every day was a conversation about, is this accurate? Are we specific enough? And I think that, and I think you just have the fans say that we were, so I'll take that as a, as a green light to say that we did portray him well.
And your co-star Nicholas Galitzine was cast first. What was the process like of auditioning and developing that chemistry with him?
Well, I want to say just a few weeks. We only met a few weeks before we actually started principal photography. I guess the Alex role was really difficult to find, and we didn't get to meet until I actually got to London. So we did a chem test. I was coming from a wedding on the East Coast, and he was filming in Louisiana or something. And so then I flew back. I guess Matthew was tracking my flight. And as soon as I landed, I went to my sister's house, set up my laptop on her kitchen counter, and was like, okay, I'm ready. And then we met. I think we did the scene a couple times. And then last night in a Q&A, he said, while they were doing the scene, I was texting Sarah Schechter, who's of Berlanti Schechter Productions, who produces the film. It was like, I think we found our Alex and Henry. And that was a really cool, he's never told me that before. So that was incredible. And then we just went straight into rehearsals.
Doing it online first, what is it like when you first meet in person and sort of, are able to see how that works face to face?
It's tough. I mean, because look, I've seen you at award shows passing by and we've never chatted, but now we're talking virtually. And so, it just feels like there's a invisible wall between you. So it's not a real connection. Like I really, as an actor and coming from the theater and being in acting class and working on shows, it's like you want that tactile, that touch with another actor. So it was exciting to be on there and, and them asked me to come on as Alex. And when we met, it was like, okay, we have a week and a half to get this relationship going and to convince people on screen that we hate each other, and then that we actually fall in love with each other. And Nick and I were just, it was kind of belabored because I was like, does this make sense? Are you feeling this? How do you feel about this? What do you think about this, Matthew? Does this line work? And I was so grateful for that time, because if we didn't have that early on, who knows if we actually would have? Because sometimes I've heard people have been cast over Zoom and they get to set and they're not like they were. They don't get along, and then production is kind of put in jeopardy.
And one of the things that's refreshing about this story is that, at least for Alex, the conflict doesn't come from the fact that this is a same-sex romance. It's more about the political ramifications of all of this happening while your character's mother is in an election year. What did you think about the way that aspect of the story was handled?
Yeah, I'm glad you actually said that. No one's ever actually asked the question in the way that you formulated it. And that's actually why I loved the book, and then obviously the screenplay, because it wasn't so focused on just their queerness. It was, at the end of the day, a love story, and that's why people fell in love with these two characters. And the high stakes was in his mother being the president and his grandfather being the King of England, right? And I think that added a whole new layer to it, and you really got to see a kind of real life expectations versus reality, and what the King of England is expecting to see of his grandson, and what Uma Thurman, who played my mother, is expecting to see of her son. And I think that it brought a lot more drama to it and a lot more interest, because as Americans, I mean, personally I'm not, but Americans do love the monarchy. They love all the information about it, and so I feel like it's a perfect storm of British and American politics all in one film.
And one of the things that also makes your character special is that we see that sort of, because he's a bisexual character, so it's we don't often see that kind of nuance in portrayals of same-sex romance or even opposite-sex romance, where he's not wrestling with that, but sort of acknowledging that about himself. What did you think about that kind of representation?
Yeah, I love that representation, because I don't think anybody is just one thing, especially in 2024. You can be, you have your day job and you have your side hustle, and maybe you also work late nights, so you can't box people in 2024. And I think that's what I also loved about Alex, is because he is so many other things and bisexual. Like, yes, it is a defining characteristic, but that's not all of who he is. And same thing with Henry. And I think that's why these characters were so dynamic and deep. When I read the book and when I read the script and when we were in these conversations, this is a love story, this is a romantic comedy, and it just so happens to be a queer romance.
And you have intimate scenes with Nicholas, of course. And we're in a period where intimacy coordinators have become common in the industry. So, like, what was it like from your end working with intimacy coordinators to create those scenes, create that sense of safety, and really tell a story with those scenes?
Yeah. Luckily, I have done some kind of risque projects in the era of intimacy coordinators. So I've been able to take full advantage of these coordinators and helping the process, and to feel safe amongst actors, because I think first thing is trust, right? And so we had Robbie Taylor Hunt with us, I think, on the first day when we started doing intimate things, and he spoke to us individually, spoke to us together, and was just fun to have. It almost felt like a buddy that was with you choreographing something. He took it very seriously, and when we expressed our concerns or had questions, he was so there for us. But also he knew that Nick and I were close and friends, and we're having a good time just being on set together and working on this, that he knew that this was just kind of going to work. And so Matthew was in all of our rehearsals, and then we had solos, and I just think that he was just spectacular about handling the entire situation, and I think you can see it in the final product.
And another important relationship you have in the film is with Sarah Shahi as the president's deputy chief of staff, who manages Alex's PR problems. And there's this really playful rapport between you two. I had a chance to talk with her. She called it very much sibling, a kind of rivalry almost between them. What was it like developing that with her? It seems like one of the more fun aspects of working on this film.
Yeah, yeah. You know, sometimes you get onto a set and you're with your co-stars and you're like, oh wow, we outside of this room, we would never hang out just because maybe we don't share the same interests or maybe we just don't vibe. But with Sarah, right away, we just kind of got each other. And I come from a family. I grew up with 5 sisters, 2 brothers, and she kind of just felt like family in a way and wanted to manage. I mean, she kind of just managed the space, demands the room. And I just love that about her. And she's so good at comedy. Her timing is impeccable and she just loves the craft. And I think, and that's why I love working with actors like that, especially Sarah, that is always can take a note and go, let's do it again. Let's do it again. And it's not like, well, what about this? What about that? And it's like, yes, I love that. Yes. And I, coming from theater, coming from improv, and you just said, yeah, let's try that. Let's try that. One for you, one for me. Let's go. And she's incredible. And all of our scenes, especially when, it was funny when my mom was on set with us and we were filming. It was the first time we were filming the Oval Office when Uma says, I know, honey, just fix it," and walks out. And then it's a single on me. And I said, I'm sorry, Mom, whatever. And then it's like, it pauses. And then a pillow hits me in the face. And it's Sarah's character. My mom was like this. On the monitor, and she's like, "Taylor, I jumped every time she hit you, but that first time I truly jumped because I was not ready for it." And it's hysterical because I do see that in the audiences, and people have told me that they jump in those moments and they love that scene and the dynamic between these 2 characters.
And even though the film came out in the midst of the Hollywood strikes, it really was able to find an audience, a passionate following, just like the book has. Was it hard seeing the film roll out and not being able to talk about it or promote it at the time?
Totally. Yeah, it was very tough to not talk about it, post about it, just because as excited as I was about it, I know that the readers were even more excited. And it was interesting to gauge if they liked it, if they didn't like it. And we had a couple of weeks where, we're #1 in the world globally in places that it's illegal to be queer. You can be stoned if you're queer in places in Africa. And to see it #1 in those countries on Amazon Prime was off the charts. And I was like, wow, this movie has something on its mind, has something to say, and has the ability to change the way people see different people and maybe folks to see themselves represented on film that haven't seen themselves represented before.
And now you're getting a chance to talk about the film, obviously. And film could even now find a second life as you're promoting it. What's that been like? Just to be able to finally, with some more distance from the film, be able to talk about it.
I was saying last night we had this incredible FYC panel, and I watched the film. I felt like for the first time with new eyes and no judgments just about 3 weeks ago. And because I've seen it in different iterations of mixing and color coordinating and not being fully done. And I kind of just didn't want to see it again because I think every actor's like this. You kind of just judge your performance. You judge, oh, I wish I did this. I want to do this better. Oh, that could have been tighter. That could have been funnier. And I was actually able to sit and watch it and actually laugh at the parts where are funny and laugh at myself and laugh at the situations. And I'm so grateful that I got to see these people last night who were watching it for the first time and people that are watching it for the 5th time and had the same responses and were so excited about it. And so having this second life is really meaningful. And I'm just like so grateful that it's happening.
Earlier this year, you were the ambassador for the Screen Actors Guild Awards. How did that come about, and what did you think about that honor?
I'm still blown away. And when I see the photos, I don't believe it, because as a kid growing up and you watch the Academy Awards, the Golden Globes, the SAG Awards, and you're like, oh man, I would love to be there one day. And then this year I got to be, present at the Golden Globes dinner. I got to go to the Oscars. I got to go and be the ambassador for the SAG Awards, like you said. And it was kind of surreal. And in any moment that I'm kind of not having that full gratitude that I always like to have, I'd always have to remind myself, everything I have right now is what I wished for 5 years ago. and just keep that in mind, because I think, comparison is the thief of joy, and being on that carpet with those incredible actors who I have loved since I was a kid, or I have, just admire as an adult, and I get to meet them, and you're like, wow, I just can't wait to work with more and more actors at this level, and just do good work and meaningful work.
Now, I'm sure a lot of people are curious about a potential sequel because the film was so successful, everybody wants more. But whether or not that happens, do you have thoughts in your mind about where you think Alex would go next? What his life would have in store for him after the events of this film?
I think Casey put out in her book, like, it's like an extra bonus section of a book. It came out, I think, in 2022, and I bought it and I read it. And so I got to see a little bit of what could be for Alex, and living in Brooklyn with Henry, and traveling back and forth, and him maybe starting to work on his political career of his own now that his mom has been reelected, and there's 4 years, and now after that, what does he do? So I would love to see where Alex goes in his political career, because I think he has such a great way of kind of code switching with different communities, because as a blue collar kid that's now, like I said, in this extraordinary circumstance in the White House and goes to Georgetown Law, he has the ability to speak really to anybody. Like, he is like the American dream. He is the everyman. And I think that he can do well in politics.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your work on the film. And thank you so much for talking with me about it today. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
Nicholas, you star in Red, White, and Royal Blue as Prince Henry, who falls in love with the son of the President of the United States. If I understand correctly, you were cast first of the two of you. What was the process like trying to find the perfect Alex for your Henry? Were there a lot of chemistry reads?
Yeah, there were quite a few. It was a funny thing because, I didn't remember this, but we did a really sort of hyper emotional scene, the Kensington Palace scene. And so by the time it actually came to filming that on set, I felt like I'd done it like a million times, and, met with some really, really fantastic actors. And I think actually being on the other side of that casting process, it was very eye-opening in the sense that, so you'd meet some really fantastic actors, but there would just be something not quite there, and it's no fault of their own. And really, as an actor myself, who's been in that position many, many times, you start to realize it's kind of not a personal thing, and sometimes it's something very specific and out of your control. And along came Taylor, and Taylor just kind of had had everything I think that the team were looking for in Alex, and I think just especially that sort of charm and that sense of humor. And I got this feeling straight away that we were going to become mates, and luckily that did turn out to be. And we had such a fun time making this movie.
And the book on which it's based has a substantial fan base. So there was a lot of attention around the project before you even started filming it. Were you already hearing from fans as soon as just your casting was announced, even before you started shooting?
Yeah, it's a funny thing because I kind of maintain that I like to try and stay offline for as much as I possibly can. But I did remember at the time, I was less kind of strict with myself, and I did remember sort of seeing, some feedback, and I mean, for the most part, it seemed overwhelmingly positive, and I think I'd kind of built up enough kind of goodwill at that point, but it's something, obviously, a role that people felt extremely protective and passionate over, and I think there will always be trepidation from an audience, a fan base of an existing IP, when you adapt it into film. And I mean, from most of the feedback I've had since the movie has come out, people seem to be satisfied. So if that's any testament, then I think we did a decent enough job.
And what kind of feedback have you gotten? Because there's a lot of, it seems like this has been a really important film and a story to people, just because, especially of how Prince Henry is dealing with an unsupportive family and trying to live his life and be himself. Has that meant a lot to people?
Definitely. And I think, like there are a lot of people who watch the movie who just see it as some sort of fun, wholesome content. And I think that's great. And there are some people who, people coming up on the street who say, it really meant something to me to watch that. And I felt very seen. And I think, we're not saving lives as actors, but I think the goal is to really make things that resonate with people and make people feel seen and heard, and make a movie that maybe a lot of people didn't have when they were growing up, and that's the stuff I think that really, really humbles you as an actor, because it's hard to know. It's hard to know what one sort of sense of spirituality is in terms of purpose in life, but something I feel like I've kind of narrowed down for myself is being able to have serious resonance with people. And so when people say these lovely things to me on the street, it really fills me with such pride.
And there's such a genuine longing in Henry, but also the film has these elements of humor as well. It's a very fun film. Which is easier for you? Which is more challenging for you as an actor, the humor or the deeper emotional stuff?
That's a really good question. Look, the fun is just fun, and the days are lighter, and it's more a sense of play. But equally, I mean, I really thrive and enjoy the moments of introspection and pain and conflict, because I think that's the kind of that's the thing that I think a lot of us actors are kind of really searching to kind of explore, and I think that's one thing I always really loved about Henry, is he has a really strong sense of self, and he's very emotionally mature, but his circumstance is very particular and is very oppressive, and I think those two things in sort of congress with each other, and culminating in that sort of Kensington Palace scene, was just so gratifying from an acting perspective. And I think that a through line I've kind of noticed in my work is when I kind of get to do those scenes of conflict, I mean, it really kind of fills me with a very sort of excited energy. So that's basically an extremely long-winded way of saying I can't choose either one.
The film was co-written and directed by Matthew Lopez, who has a theater background, won a Tony and an Olivier Award for The Inheritance. Do you think that theater background influenced the way he worked with actors, or what he brought to the set of Red, White, and Royal Blue?
Yeah, well, I mean, he was very adamant we have a couple of weeks of rehearsal beforehand, which is not very typical unless you're doing something that requires a sort of fairly heavy pre-production. So that was one thing that definitely was very sort of theater focused. I think he's very specific on text, which is also very, very theater. It was interesting, and I think the script, I mean, it's heightened in some capacities, and we kind of in some capacities, sorry, and we go along with that because that's kind of the tone of our world, and I think it works really, really well. And so I think really the movie ended up being a very sort of nice blend between Matthew's wonderful sort of theatrical skills and a sort of a groundingness that hopefully Taylor and I and among the other fantastic cast brought to the table.
And there are intimate scenes between you and Taylor, which require a lot of trust between actors, and also between the actors and the filmmakers. What's the process of working alongside an intimacy coordinator to craft those scenes, to tell stories through those scenes, and to make sure everyone's sort of comfortable?
It's funny because Robbie Taylor Hunt, who is our wonderful intimacy coordinator, he and I have worked together twice now, because he was my coordinator for Mary and George as well. And so given the context of my last few projects, I kind of have become very familiar with working with intimacy coordinators now. And I mean, it's very bizarre how these are a fairly new invention and haven't existed for a really, really long time, because they can help sort of intellectualize something that can seem really, really terrifying for a lot of people. And I'm quite lucky that I've really worked with people who are very supportive, and now I've become very sort of comfortable within that space. But Robbie was really able to help us choreograph, a sense of yearning, falling into a sense of deep love. And, we never want a scene of intimacy, I think, to feel, solely salacious or not purposeful in a way. And I think an intimacy coordinator is a really great litmus test in figuring out what the purpose of a scene is. How does this help our narrative? How does this move story? And so, Robbie worked with Taylor and I and got us comfortable with each other. It's always strange when you have to make out with your friend, but we felt really connected and supported by Robbie, and I'm very, very grateful for his really incredible work on the movie.
There's another memorable scene in the film with Stephen Fry as your character's grandfather, the King of the United Kingdom. He has such a presence on screen when he shows up. What was it like working with him in that scene?
Well, he's a national treasure in the UK as well. Americans know him a lot less, but I grew up admiring him because of his his wit and his intellect, and suddenly here he is. He's granddad, and Stephen's just someone he's naturally extremely curious and open, and I think that lent itself to how wonderfully smart he is, it was honestly just such a joy getting to work with him. Someone who's so experienced within the space, and he has an amazing background in comedy as well. We didn't see as much of that in our movie, but we were so grateful to have him be a part of our movie.
Did you have a favorite scene from the film to shoot overall?
I mean, it's such a cliche to say, but I mean, the cake scene was so fun because, for the rest of my career, I might never do a scene involving a 7-foot cake, whatever it was. And it was over a couple of days, and, you'd find icing in your ear canal at the end of the day, and you try and sort of scrub that sort of very saccharine, sweet smell off of your skin at the end. And you just seem to kind of stay on you. But it's just such a kind of iconic moment of the book and of the movie, and so I guess for that reason I like that scene.
Now, I know a lot of people have speculated about a possible sequel to anything that's as popular as this is. Whether or not that happens, what do you think the future might hold for Henry and Alex? Like, what other challenges would you imagine they might face?
Yeah, it's so interesting, to try and to add to this story and not sort of tarnish, I think, the wonderful work that's been done. You hope just a sense of development for the both of them. I mean, certainly for Henry, what is it like, kind of being out in the world really and free in a lot of ways for the first time, and maybe his sort of tastes change, his style changes, his he feels he can explore the world in a really different way. It's a fun thing to kind of imagine for both of those characters. I can speak sort of less for Alex. I'm sure Taylor has his own thoughts, but for Henry, I sort of wish him to be able to kind of realize a lot of the freedom that he didn't have for the previous 20 odd years of his life.
And for you as an actor, the last 12 months have been particularly eventful. You've had a number of major projects released. Red, White, and Royal Blue, Bottoms, Mary and George, as you mentioned. The Idea of You just came out. Did you film them all close together for them to be released the way they were?
Literally back to back. I think I'm the longest I ever had between any one of those projects was probably about a couple weeks. But I literally went straight from Bottoms to Red, White, and Royal Blue, and like started the day after I landed. Sorry, I had a couple weeks between Red, White, and Royal Blue and The Idea of You, where I was chemistry testing for that movie. And then I had a few days over Christmas before I had to go into pre-production for Mary and George, which then I did for 6 months, after that. So it was definitely a pretty grueling year. And kind of, in a really interesting way, I felt like I kind of had to almost rely more on my instincts than really being able to be given any sort of time to prep these projects, which was kind of a very interesting practice to see kind of what's already kicking around in there. What are your kind of really, yeah. Like what are your instincts with each character? What comes naturally? What comes quickest? And I'm just very. I could not have imagined or hoped that all 4 of these projects would have had either such sort of wonderful fan support or critical or both. And it feels. I mean, especially this week I was so honored to be invited to the Met, and it feels a very long way from waiting tables and working in frozen yogurt stores about 10 years ago. So yeah, very grateful.
And what is the Met Gala like? As it seems so surreal just to watch it from afar and see all the fashion and just the footage of it.
I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, it's so. I think that sort of the expression of creativity is so overwhelming. I mean, I'm someone who's really always loved clothes, but have really kind of come into an appreciation, a much larger appreciation in the last few years. And you kind of see all the amazing designers' handiwork up close, and also really meet with a lot of your peers. I was very lucky that I was sitting with Tom Ford, who's been a style icon of mine for a while, and gave me lots of wonderful advice. And I've met Anna Wintour, who had seen The Idea of You and really liked it, and she's just a force, a wonderful, highly intellectual woman, and I think it was just it felt very surreal in a lot of ways, because I think I really just I love the work, and that's kind of if I can just work for the rest of my life, I'll be really, really happy without any of the sort of the extra stuff that comes with it. But I just felt very, very honored that I was even invited, to be honest.
And after such a year that you've had with all of these projects being released, have you noticed at this point yet, like a lot of new opportunities opening up, a lot more people recognizing you from various projects?
Yeah, I think I definitely have more agency in my career than I ever did before. And, it sometimes becomes the power of no. Is there's maybe a really fantastic project, really well written, but it's just not the right thing for you to do in that moment. And having the luxury of being able to say no to things is something that I never really expected. But in the same way, suddenly there's this kind of cornucopia of opportunities that I never had before that is so enticing. And I think already the sort of things that I have sort of booked for the next year or so will be really exciting, different shades to people, to myself, that people haven't seen before. And I'd say that's the really exciting thing. I like really being able to sort of I suppose surprise people with the work I'm doing, and having that kind of run of 4 projects that all felt quite distinctly different. I think I'd love to kind of continue doing that.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your work in Red, White, and Royal Blue, and in absolutely everything else that I've seen you in already and will see you in the future. Thank you so much for talking with me about it.
Thank you, mate. It was a pleasure talking to you.